Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. This time, we're taking a deep dive into the world of enterprise AI development, using a recent report from Morning Consult as our guide. They surveyed over 1,000 AI developers all across the U.S. late last year. We'll get into some specifics in a moment, but I thought it'd be good to get your take on some of the big picture findings first.
Yeah, for sure. It's a really interesting report that gives a glimpse into what's going on the front lines from the people actually building the future.
Okay, so what jumped out at you?
One of the things that really surprised me was the number of developers who actually consider themselves experts in generative AI. Less than 25% of those surveyed felt like they were at that level.
Wow, really?
Yeah. And that's with all the hype around generative AI. I think it just goes to show how fast this field is moving,
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, generative AI is everywhere these days. I guess I just assumed everyone would be a pro by now. Is it just because it's so new, do you think?
I mean, that's definitely part of it. Like, what's considered an expert today could be totally different tomorrow. But I think it also highlights how complex this stuff really is. We're talking about systems that can write text, compose music, generate images, even code,
Yeah, I get that. I guess it's a lot to master. It sounds like everyone's kind of still figuring it out. I mean, how do you even define expert in a field that's changing so rapidly?
That's the challenge, right? The goalposts keep moving. But I think expertise isn't just knowing the technical details. It's about understanding the nuances, the potential problems, the ethics of it all.
So it's less about having a specific set of skills and more about having a deep understanding of the field, even if it keeps changing. Which actually makes this next finding even more interesting. The report found that there is a 17% difference in developer comfort levels between generative AI and what we call classical AI. 44% of the developers surveyed said they were very comfortable with generative AI, but only 27% said the same about classical AI. Which seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, you'd think developers would be more comfortable with the older, more established technologies. But I think there are a few things going on here. Like, generative AI, even though it's complex, often deals with stuff we see every day, like text, images, and audio, right? Whereas classical AI, which is more focused on, like, algorithms and models, feels more abstract.
So it's like the difference between knowing how to speak a language versus understanding all the grammar rules.
Exactly. And then there's the hype factor, like we talked about. All the buzz around generative AI means there's a ton of tools and resources available. So maybe it's easier for developers to feel like they're making progress, even if they're not quite masters yet.
Ah, that makes sense.
And also, let's not forget that classical AI has been around for a while now. So there are probably a lot of legacy systems that newer developers might find kind of intimidating.
Yeah, it sounds like it's not that generative AI is necessarily easier, but it just feels more approachable. But regardless of how approachable it is, this report makes it clear that AI development is tough. One of the biggest problems developers mentioned was the lack of standardized processes. Over a third said that was a major pain point for them. Now, I'm not a developer myself, so can you explain why that's such a big deal?
Sure. Imagine building a house without any blueprints or, agreed upon ways of doing things. Each team would have its own way of working, and that would lead to inconsistencies and miscommunication.
So basically, a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, exactly. And in the AI world, that means projects go off the rails, and the systems don't work as intended.
So what are the consequences of that? Besides a lot of frustration, I mean.
Well, it makes it really hard to collaborate, ensure the quality of your solutions, manage risk, and scale your projects. It's basically constant firefighting.
And I imagine that firefighting takes up even more time, which developers are already short on. The report also looked at how much time developers spend on different phases of a project. Things get really interesting in the later stages, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. In the early phases, like setting up the infrastructure and choosing the model, you can kind of predict how long it'll take. But when you get to things like deploying and evaluating the models, there's a huge variation in the time spent.
So are those later phases just inherently less predictable?
I think it's a mix of factors.
Yeah.
You might run into unexpected technical problems, the requirements might change, or you might have trouble integrating with existing systems. And this is where the lack of standardization we talked about earlier becomes a real problem. Without clear processes for handling those curveballs, things can get out of control really quickly.
So it's like you need a crystal ball to know how long those later stages will take. And even then, you're still bound to hit some roadblocks.
That's a perfect way to put it. It just shows how important it is to have good planning, clear communication, and be able to adapt quickly. It's not just about having the technical skills. You also need to be flexible and have good problem-solving skills to navigate this constantly changing landscape.
It sounds like AI development requires not just technical expertise, but also a healthy dose of resilience
For sure.
and maybe even a sense of humor.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely not for the faint of heart.
So we've got developers dealing with complex new technology, a lack of standardized processes, and project timelines that are all over the place. And on top of all that, they have a whole bunch of tools to manage, which, as we'll see next, creates its own set of challenges. All right, let's dive into this tool sprawl issue. The report found that 72% of developers use something like 5 to 15 different tools to build just one AI application. I mean, that just sounds overwhelming.
Yeah, it does seem a bit much, doesn't it? But there are a couple of reasons why this happens. Remember, AI development is still pretty new, and it's moving super fast. There are tons of new tools coming out all the time, and developers are always looking for the best ones.
Okay, I get that. But wouldn't it be better to have a smaller set of tools that everyone knows how to use?
Well, ideally, yes, but it's not always that simple. Different projects might need different tools, and then there's the issue of legacy systems. A lot of companies are dealing with older tech, so they have to find ways to integrate these new tools with what they already have.
So it's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole sometimes.
Exactly.
So it's not just developers being obsessed with shiny new tools. But what's the downside of all this? Is it just a matter of things being a bit messy, or are there real consequences?
Oh, there are definitely real consequences. For one thing, it affects efficiency. Developers waste a lot of time trying to get all these different tools to work together. Imagine constantly switching between programs with different interfaces and quirks. It's exhausting.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare. So less time actually building stuff. Any other downsides?
Well, there's also the problem of data silos. When you have all these different tools, data gets scattered everywhere. It becomes really hard to get a complete picture of what's going on, and it makes collaboration difficult. And then there's the increased risk of errors and security issues. The more tools you have, the more potential points of failure there are.
So more tools, more problems. What's the solution then? Should we just tell developers to stop experimenting and stick to the basics?
Well, that's one option, but it's not very realistic. Developers need to be able to choose the right tools for the job, and trying new things is how we innovate. It's more about being strategic and managing the tools you use effectively.
How do you do that?
It starts with understanding what you're trying to achieve with AI. What are your goals? What kind of projects are you working on? Once you know that, you can start to identify a core set of tools that can handle most of your needs.
So building a solid foundation and adding specialty tools only when necessary.
Exactly. And when you do add new tools, think about how they'll integrate with your existing systems from the start. Choose tools with open APIs that are designed to work well with others.
Makes sense. It's about being proactive, not just reactive. Speaking of new tools, there's one that seems to be doing really well. The report says 99% of developers are using coding assistants for AI development. That's almost everyone.
Yeah, coding assistants are becoming really popular. And for good reason.
Well, tell me more. Why are they so popular?
Think of them as really advanced autocomplete for code. They can help you write code faster, avoid mistakes, and even suggest better ways of doing things.
So they're basically AI-powered assistants that make you a better coder.
That's a good way to put it.
No wonder everyone loves them. But earlier, we talked about how developers don't have a lot of time to learn new tools. How do coding assistants fit into that?
Well, one of the reasons they're so popular is that they're easy to use. A lot of them integrate really well with existing development environments, and they have simple interfaces. Plus, they get better over time because they learn your coding style.
So it's a win-win, right? You save time and become a better coder in the process.
Exactly.
But even with these great tools, developers still have to strike a balance. The report says nearly 80% of developers only experiment with new tools occasionally.
That's right. It's tough to decide when to stick with what you know and when to try something new. You want to be efficient, but you also don't want to miss out on something that could be really helpful.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between comfort and innovation.
Yeah, I think so. It's about being strategic. Set aside some time to experiment and learn new things. Do your research, read reviews, talk to other developers. And if you try something and it doesn't work, don't be afraid to move on.
Don't get caught up in the hype. Speaking of hype, let's talk about AI agents. Apparently, 99% of developers are either exploring or developing AI agents for some use case.
Yeah, they're definitely a hot topic right now.
Before we get into the details, can you give us a quick explanation of what AI agents are and why is everyone so excited about them? Okay, so AI agents, break it down for us. What are they?
Well, they're basically software programs that can act on their own. They can learn from data, make decisions, and interact with the world in ways that are kind of like human intelligence.
So, like a digital assistant, but on steroids, they can do more than just schedule meetings and set reminders, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. They can handle really complicated tasks, adapt to new situations, and even work together. The possibilities are pretty much endless.
I see why everyone's so excited. The report said the top 3 use cases are customer service, project management, and content creation.
Exactly. Think about AI agents that can answer customer questions 24/7, so human reps can focus on the tougher stuff. Or AI project managers that can streamline workflows and keep projects running smoothly.
It's like having a whole team of AI assistants working for you. It frees up a lot of time for people to focus on more strategic things. But what about the whole robots taking over the world thing? Are we not worried about AI agents becoming too powerful?
It's a valid concern. But actually, the report found that fear of AI agents becoming overly autonomous is pretty low on the list of developers' worries. Only 22% said it was a major concern.
Huh, that's interesting. Why do you think that is?
Well, AI agents are still relatively new. Most of the ones we have now are designed for specific tasks and still need human supervision.
So, no Skynet just yet.
Not quite. But even as AI agents get more advanced, I think we're realizing that autonomy isn't always a bad thing.
Really?
Yeah, think about it. We want AI agents to be able to handle tasks without us having to micromanage them.
Right, that's kind of the whole point.
Exactly. We want them to take care of the routine stuff, optimize processes, and make smart decisions based on the data they have.
So it's not about being afraid of autonomy, it's about making sure it's implemented responsibly.
Right. It's about setting clear boundaries and making sure AI agents are aligned with human values and goals.
It's a collaboration, not a competition.
Exactly. We want AI to help us, not replace us.
Maybe those robot takeover fears are more about our own anxieties about change than the technology itself.
It's a good point. We need to have open and honest conversations about AI and focus on developing it in the way that benefits everyone.
So we've talked about a lot today, the skills gaps, the tool sprawl, the rise of AI agents. What are the big takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the main thing is that AI development is constantly changing. What's cutting edge today might be old news tomorrow. So you need to be willing to learn and adapt. Don't be afraid to try new things, challenge assumptions, and stay curious.
Love that. Stay curious. Great advice.
And one last thought. The future of AI is not set in stone. We're shaping it with the choices we make today. We have a responsibility to use this technology wisely and ethically to make sure it benefits everyone.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in this. Well, that was fascinating. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of AI development. Make sure to check out the full report from Morning Consult. We'll have a link on our website. And as always, let us know what you think. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the latest trends and insights. Until then, stay curious.